I'm with Robin Hyam, retired diplomat, friend, who has written a very interesting book, although it's kind of hard to say what the book is. Robin, what's the book about?
Let me think. It's about reasonable accommodation, and I don't mean housing. I mean reasonable accommodation in the context of the, remember the Quebec discussion about l'accommodation raisonnable?
Sure.
This book is about that. It's called Who Do We Think We Are? And it's a discussion amongst 4 newcomers to Canada, imagined newcomers, and 4 what I call long-established Canadians. It's a discussion about how we run this country and what should our processes be. How do we live together? We're now, when we're a community, when we're so many communities of different backgrounds. It's the multiculturalism discussion, which is on the screen so much in Canada these days and in other countries as well.
Yeah, very much in Canada. But what made you, Robin, decide to write the book?
Well, like you, I lived abroad a lot and spent many dinner conversations trying to explain ourselves to others, and gradually came to the understanding that one of the things that makes us interesting to others, makes us interesting to those who are of interest to us abroad, is our capacity for governing our diversity, for getting along across the cultural differences and all the things that make us different, if you like. Coming back to Canada and seeing how interesting this discussion has become at home as well, I decided it was time to do a little research on the project. I put together 3 conferences, Canada-European Union discussions on the governance of diversity, and learned that it was one of the things for sure that the Europeans particularly found that we were ahead of the wave internationally on governing diversity. So voila, I decided to do a book that was less academic than designed for popular consumption, for the non-expert.
Yeah,
like that.
It's I think what strikes me reading it, Robin, is just how very timely this book is. There's so much more interest and clearly a growing interest because Canada is becoming more cosmopolitan. We know that even greater change is coming in terms of our cultural diversity.
Exactly. In fact, that's the starting point of the discussion, the imaginary discussion in the book, is that there's more coming. There's more diversity coming. You don't necessarily have to like it, but you better get in a position to manage and live with it. There's no turning back now. It's kind of the starting point assumption. And it goes from there.
It's not a novel. It's not a how would you describe it?
It's not a textbook. It's not a novel.
Not a textbook either.
I've written it. It's interesting you ask. I've written it in the form of a radio play. And my 4 discussants, I have, like I said, 4 newcomers to Canada, and they've given them each a name and a little profile in the book, and it's written as though they were having a conversation around the table like you and I are. And the idea is to expose different perspectives on the business of living together, how we work on it. And so it walks through 12 chapters of discussion on different ideas around the notion of living in communities of diversity, and particularly in the Canadian model, as we call it.
Who do you think would be particularly interested in reading the book? We've talked about this before, and I've considered it such a good educational tool about all the various points of view that come into play.
Well, 2 things. I've decided, when I started this book, I wanted to take some of the ideas down off the shelf in the academic community. You know, I'm working at the University of Ottawa, and I've heard very sophisticated, complex, and highly researched arguments about living together, about diversity governance in this country. Most of them take a PhD or better to understand, and my idea with the book was to popularize this discussion, to bring it bring it across to a level which is accessible to the non-expert, to the man on the bus, or the person on the bus. So the book tries to make the discussion, help give the idea that we don't take ourselves too seriously on this. We're one of the little tricks of Canadian discussions is that we are able to laugh at a little bit, to take ourselves not too seriously and to have some fun with this discussion. This book attempts to do that, to expose some of the comical complexities and to make it, like I say, accessible to the non-expert. I've aimed at, hopefully, at maybe last year high school, first year university reading level. But the idea is to provoke discussion. It doesn't take a position. My 8 characters are assigned the task of explaining their point of view on how much accommodation or reasonable accommodation they think is necessary for us to live together constructively. Peacefully, of course, but not just peacefully, constructively. And we may have some fun while we're at it.
I think it succeeds very well in setting out, in effective arguments, the various points of view. I must say, before I read it, I thought of there's several ideas, but really your book covers very well the way you've structured it, and the way you've created these characters, and how they represent very plausible points of view. I think it's succeeded very well.
Thank you. I should say, I have to admit, to confess, most of the, I have to call them insights, they're not mine. They come from 3 Canada-European Union discussions that I organized, conferences that I organized. The first one was called Building on Plurality. And we looked at that conference, we were 15 Canadians and 15 Europeans, around the round table, and we looked at how do you treat diversity in a country or in a community as an opportunity, not as a problem, but as an opportunity. How do you build on it and leverage those characteristics of your community in a positive way? We did round 2, same format, different people, but the same format, and we looked at the limits to diversity. And there we examined how much and how fast can you accommodate newcomers to your community before the wheels come off, before you lose your social cohesion and you have this balkanization and you find the formation of cultural and ethnic ghettos in a city or in a community. How much can you take before it becomes problematic, where you lose your social cohesion?
And just to interject, but that's the kind of discussion that you don't really hear very much in Canada.
It's always under the radar. We're a little embarrassed to think, is it possible that we can't get along with each other? Are we operating at over our absorptive capacity? And that's part of the discussion. The third conference was to take the results of the first 2 and look at what we call the mechanisms. What are the political, legal, regulatory, behavioral, organizational mechanisms that a community has to have in place in order to manage these, to capitalize on the opportunities and to manage the challenges, the limitations. And we looked at how do you do it? And of course, the answers from the Europeans were saying to us, Canadians around the table, I think you've heard me say this, don't you guys get it in Canada? You're ahead of the wave. Learn to talk about it. It'll help you explain yourself to yourselves if you can explain yourselves to us. And by the way, if you screw up on this, we're in real trouble, because the Canadian model is the one we keep holding up as the evidence that it's possible to do this, to have peaceful, constructive coexistence, even in Europe, if you like, notwithstanding the challenges that we're all facing.
Robin, we're in Canada, we may at this point be able to say that we're ahead of the wave. But we know there's a lot of water coming, that we know that there's greater diversity. We're not going to see any radical change in our demographic tendencies, our immigration, and so on. I mean, what can we do about it? What should we be? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, well, as you say, I haven't answered that question. It's a little too hard for me. No, the book is called Who Do We Think We Are for a Reason, because it invites just exactly the kind of discussion that it provokes it even, that we are having, and that is, so what? What are you going to do about it? Is it sustainable? And the discussants in the book conclude that the famous Canadian model, which is the absence of a model, the absence of an identity in classic cultural identity terms for Canada, that is, has been an advantage for us. It's increased our absorptive capacity. It's left us more relaxed than many other countries who can say who they are and this is the way they dance. It's been an advantage for us. The discussants, as in my conferences, come to the conclusion that maybe we've got about as far as we can go without being clear, without having reference points, without knowing what we expect of each other as citizens. That is the balance of responsibilities and rights and the to use the language of the concluding paragraph, around here we do things like this, and we're not very good at saying that so far. My discussants say, time out, we better decide. When newcomers and existing Canadians as well, current Canadians as well, need more reference points. They know when you're not, they need to know when we're not acting Canadian, whatever that means. So the idea is to lead us at the discussion, to make us worry a little bit that maybe we have to sort things out and lay down in some formal, implicit or explicit way. You have to make room on the sidewalk when you're walking with the others. You have to make space, but not too much. That discussion is to come. My idea, of course, sometime is to answer the questions raised by this book. In the meantime, the book provokes those questions and lays out kind of the legitimacy of asking them from the different perspectives that my characters represent.
I think that's very well put. Yeah, very well put.
Well, like I said, the idea is to make it fun more than
more than what you have to go through at the university.
Well,
Robin, your book is available on Amazon.com and perhaps soon in Amazon.ca?
Yes, I think so, and you can get it at Nicholas Hoare in Ottawa.
Good.
Yeah.
Robin, congratulations again on the book, and thank you very much.
Thanks. It's fun talking to you.
Good.
Bye-bye.